Of course, Princess Precure would be your favorite. We returned to the series after a 1-week break with the band Snatch. Well, okay, that's interesting. I mean, it's not the first time we've seen this show open with these guys, but I wonder how much focus they're gonna get, especially considering the fact that they're showing the credits in order to skip the opening this week. Yes! Anyway, these guys were discussing their next course of action, and in the process, they had some legit wholesome moments together. Anyone want to take bets as to what's going to be the most popular yaoi ship to come out of the series? In the end, Best came to the conclusion that they needed to understand their enemy and targets a little more.
Dude,
I'm pretty sure you're already halfway there. But yeah, this is what the whole episode was going to be about. These 4 dudes cross-dressing, and you know what? I'm absolutely here for it. Like, yeah, I'm not always a fan of villains acting like total goofballs, as I do think it gets in the way of actual character and plot progression, but in this case, these guys are technically being proactive by trying to understand the opposite gender a little more, which is kind of essential when invading a world where only girls are allowed in. They would at least need disguises in order to gather intel from them. Also, with some other shows, I think they tend to make some jokes involving the villains wear a little thin through just being way too repetitive. Here, however, not only is this likely going to be like a one-off, but these dudes just went all in on it. I mean, Callisto wrote whole scripts for them to follow, while Drun, who's probably the most stereotypically manly of this group, was the one who actually procured the dresses for them, and put on easily the most ridiculous voice. Granted, Gita still didn't want any part of it, and easily became my favorite character in this episode, as he tried his hardest to not join in.
I feel
like I'm taking crazy pills!
However, Trisymite, the call of the skirt, which again he was already pretty much wearing, was too strong. I feel like I need all of the adults possible. With that, the band decided to split up in the Alisphere to cover more ground. As a result, each of them ended up having their own little adventures. Starting with Bess, he ended up running into Toucan Sam's cousin who, in spite of being a baker, I'm just going to assume that he at least doesn't have diabetes like Sam from eating too much overprocessed cereal. But yeah, after learning that they were going to be cooking sweets with Kaede, he decided to scope them out totally just for recon, and not because he had developed a massive sweet tooth from being the thinker of this team. But yeah, they had set up a crib stand, which let Kaede show off her idol CQC. Now, surprisingly, the evilest character in the show remains to be Naruko. But yeah, sadistic singing aside, Bess was able to send some muse essence coming off the crib, which just makes me wonder what's the difference between that and Kyakkyalu. Meanwhile, Gita, who was still apprehensive over what they were doing, considered to wash off his makeup, but decided against it totally because he wanted to maintain his facade, and not because he was kind of getting into it. Regardless, he did end up attracting attention anyway, but not because he blew his cover. Nope, pretty much like all of the band members in this episode, their disguises made them look like the prettiest girls in the Alisphere, with his own natural femboyness coming across probably the strongest. So much so, they ended up attracting the attention of Miyai Himisaki. Now, of course, as an aspiring princess, she wanted to dress the part, which Gita had down pat. In turn, Gita didn't see the big deal behind wearing nice clothes because, yeah, guys don't generally care about that stuff. But this was an episode where they were exploring the differences in the taste and tendencies of the genders, and it led to an actually kind of deep conversation between the two. Though Gita also rightfully didn't want to have to hang out with the nosy little loli more than necessary, so he tried to have her go to a non-existent shop, which she quickly caught on to.
I'll chase you to the ends of the earth!
On that note, the apex predator of the band actually hinted at some possibly intriguing little backstory in regards to them and their queen.
But
But yeah, in case you hadn't noticed, each of the band members were running into previous victims of the week. In Drun's case, he ran into someone that he had actually taken music lessons from, Mikan, who was practicing more of her musical kung fu. He joined in on her practice, with the two quickly getting into it, which kind of makes sense considering that Mikan has the voice of the Omega Femboy. And again, he hinted at times being not nearly as peaceful as they were now, which might be hinting at why the band Snatch were trying to shake up the status quo like they were. Interesting stuff, and it is actually nice to see a different side to Drun when he's not delivering elbow drops to girls. Lastly, there's Callisto, who ran to a new character this week, who according to the credits was named Saki Somoto, who was an aspiring saxophone player. Though, while she certainly had skills, she wasn't quite good enough to attract much of a crowd, and in turn wasn't generating much music essence. Thus, to foster her growth, Callisto decided to give her a little assistance. This led to, unironically, one of the best musical sequences in this whole show. Like, yeah, obviously, the premise was still very silly, with Callisto and later the rest of the band who joined in being dudes in drag, but by that same token, they made some really good music with Saki. As a result, they ended up generating a lot of music essence, and while they couldn't harvest it as there was too much of a crowd, you could say they made an investment for the future. Thus, there did seem to be a little bit of scheming behind Callisto encouraging Saki to get better.
所詮は通りすがりだからな。
And he's also a fan of Kamen Rider Decade. Well, can't fault this guy for having good taste. With that, the band returned to their lair, and actually were able to report in some useful findings, like the fact that music essence could be generated from other non-music related sources, and was just as valid to farm. And while they did seem to develop a deeper admiration for the opposite gender, the episode ended with them declaring that they would get straight back into business next week, especially with their new intel. Oh, and kind of in place of not having an opening this week, we actually got a special ending theme with the band Snatch, led by Callisto, singing it, so yeah, I don't think I even need to justify why this is amazing. I mean, it certainly didn't hurt that the 3D chessboard was a pretty awesome visual. We also got a little post-credit scene where Gita was trying on his dress again, because I'm sure he's just playing another recon mission, and did develop a little kink for cross-dressing. Yeah, that's it. This was an amazing episode that actually made me overlook the fact that the title characters didn't even appear at all. Yup, the princesses and even Navia were completely absent this week, and yet I didn't mind it for a second as these guys had an incredibly fun little adventure. Like I swear, throughout this episode, I want to say yes queen with a certain pronunciation to it, but I didn't say it, I swear. Stop looking at me like that. As I said, I'm usually not too much of a fan of overly goofy villains, as at least with modern Precure antagonists, that becomes pretty much their only characteristic. That said, I'm not necessarily against it either, especially if it eventually leads to characterization, which this episode pulled off beautifully. While not outright good guys just yet, as let's be honest here, these are still some creeps who are trying to get close to younger girls, the band Snatch do at least have some amiable qualities to them. Just the fact that they took cross-dressing so damn seriously was not only hilarious, but also showed that they were dedicated to their jobs. They also acknowledged that their victims have talents that should be recognized before they inevitably snatch them away. Stuff like that does show that these guys are three-dimensional characters who recognize the importance of self-expression, as they even hinted that they were legit performers at one point. What happened and why they've gone down their current path remains to be seen, but for now, this is just overall a really fun episode that developed the antagonist in probably the funniest and most entertaining way possible, with some amazing tunes to boot. While I look forward to seeing the princesses again next week, let us never forget who the true best girl of the show is. Gita. Thanks for watching, and if you identify as someone who just enjoys fun videos, well, I think we can help with that. We've got something new coming out almost every day, with a few new projects in the works too. Look forward to Kamen Rider Gav, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and if you excuse me, I've got to do the manliest activity possible. Organizing my plushie collection.